The white silk of her wedding gown felt like a shroud as Emma stood alone at the altar, her bouquet trembling in her hands. 500 guests stared at her with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity as the minutes ticked by. 10 minutes. 20. 30. The whispers started small, then grew into a murmur that filled the cathedral like gathering storm clouds. Marcus wasn't coming. The man she'd loved for 3 years, the one who'd promised her forever just last night, had vanished like smoke. Emma's mother rushed forward, mascara streaming down her face, but Emma held up her hand. She wasn't going to collapse. She wasn't going to give everyone the breakdown they were waiting for. Instead, she did something that would change her life forever. She gathered her gown, walked down that impossibly long aisle with her head held high, and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun of downtown Boston. The street was alive with the usual Saturday chaos. Tourists snapped photos of the historic church where she'd just been humiliated. Street vendors hawked their wares. And there, slumped against the church steps, was an elderly man in tattered clothes, his weathered face hidden beneath a grimy baseball cap. A cardboard sign beside him read, "Homeless. Hungry. Anything helps." Emma's friends and family were calling her name from inside, but she couldn't hear them anymore. All she could see was this old man, invisible to the bustling crowd around him. People stepped over his outstretched legs without a glance. A woman pulled her child away from him as if poverty were contagious. Something inside Emma cracked open. Here she was, drowning in her own pain, wearing a dress that cost more than most people made in a month, pitying herself. And here was someone who had nothing. Not even dignity in the eyes of passers-by. She knelt down beside him, her elaborate gown pooling on the dirty sidewalk. The man looked up, startled, revealing roomy brown eyes set in a face carved with the hardships of street life. He couldn't have been younger than 70. "Sir," Emma said softly, "I know this is going to sound absolutely insane, but would you do me the honor of marrying me?" The old man blinked. A small crowd was gathering now, people pulling out their phones. "Miss, I think you've got the wrong person," he said, his voice raspy but kind. "No," Emma said, surprised by her own conviction. "I have a wedding all set up in there. Flowers, cake, a reception with dinner for 500 people. All that food will go to waste. The honeymoon suite at the Fairmont is paid for. And most importantly, I have a heart that's ready to commit to something real, something that matters. I don't know your story, sir, but I know mine just took an unexpected turn. So what do you say? Will you marry me and help me turn the worst day of my life into something meaningful?" The old man studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It transformed his entire face. "Young lady, I think you might be crazy. But I've been hungry for 3 days, and that dinner sounds mighty good. My name's Thomas. I'm Emma. Let's do this." What happened next became the stuff of local legend. Emma helped Thomas to his feet and led him into the church. The gasps from the congregation were audible. Her mother nearly fainted. Her father started to protest, but Emma stood at the altar with Thomas beside her and announced to everyone present that sometimes life pushes you toward your true purpose, and hers was revealing itself right now. "This man has probably been walked past by half the people in this room," she said, her voice steady. "Including me, probably, on other days. Today, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to see him. And I'm inviting all of you to see him. Too. Father Mackenzie, if you'd be so kind, let's have a ceremony." The priest, bless his heart, was progressive enough to recognize a moment of grace when he saw one. He performed a simple blessing ceremony, careful to keep it spiritual rather than legally binding, and Emma and Thomas stood together as an unlikely pair united by circumstance and compassion. The reception was surreal. Thomas sat at the head table, initially overwhelmed, as servers brought him plate after plate of food. Emma watched him eat with the desperation of someone who'd forgotten what a full stomach felt like. She'd made an announcement that any guest who was uncomfortable could leave, but to her surprise, most stayed. Something about the raw humanity of the moment held them captive. As the evening wore on, Emma sat with Thomas and learned his story. He'd been a middle school teacher once, married to his high school sweetheart for 40 years. When she died of cancer, the medical bills had destroyed him. He'd lost his house, his savings, everything. Too proud to ask his estranged daughter for help, too old to start over, he'd ended up on the streets. That had been 5 years ago. "I had a plan once," Thomas said, his eyes distant. Patricia and I were going to travel. See the Grand Canyon. Take that road trip to California. We had a whole life mapped out. He looked at Emma. Sometimes the map burns, and you find yourself in territory you never imagined. Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm so sorry about your wife. Don't be sorry, dear. Be grateful you've got time to draw a new map. That boy who left you today did you a favor. He showed you who he was before you wasted decades on him. They talked for hours. Emma's friends, initially scandalized, began to join the conversation. They listened to Thomas speak about his years teaching, about the students he'd helped, about the life he'd built and lost. He wasn't just a homeless man anymore. He was Thomas. He was real. When the evening ended, Emma took Thomas to the honeymoon suite, gave him the bedroom while she took the couch, and in the morning, she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She used the money she'd saved for her honeymoon to put a deposit on a small apartment for Thomas. She contacted his daughter, facilitating a tearful reunion after years of silence. She connected him with social services, helped him apply for social security benefits he'd been unaware of, and got him medical care for health issues he'd been ignoring. But Emma didn't stop with Thomas. The experience had awakened something in her. She quit her corporate marketing job and founded a nonprofit called Visible, dedicated to providing direct services to Boston's homeless population. She turned her analytical skills toward securing grants and donations. She turned her network of wealthy friends into a fundraising machine. 2 years later, Emma stood in the community center that Visible had opened, watching Thomas teach a math class to homeless youth trying to get their GEDs. He'd become one of their star volunteers, living proof that a hand up could change everything. Marcus had reached out months after the wedding, full of apologies and excuses. Cold feet. Panic. Stupidity. Emma had listened politely and declined his request to try again. She'd found her purpose, and it hadn't involved him. The local news did a story on Emma's unusual wedding day and what had come from it. The reporter asked if she regretted how things had turned out. Emma smiled. I was abandoned at an altar, and in my pain and humiliation, I stumbled into the most important relationship of my life. Not a romantic one, but a human one. Thomas taught me that we're all one catastrophe away from needing help, and we're all one act of kindness away from hope. So no, I don't regret a single moment. Sometimes the worst day of your life is actually a doorway to your best one. You just have to be brave enough to walk through it. The story went viral, inspiring similar acts of compassion across the country. But for Emma, the real reward was simpler. It was Thomas's smile when he walked into his apartment each evening. It was the young man who got his GED and then his college degree. It was knowing that she'd turned her pain into purpose, her humiliation into humanity. She'd gone to that church expecting to marry a man she loved. Instead, she'd married her true calling. And that, she thought, was the most surreal and beautiful plot twist of all.